Deconstructing and changing patriarchal culture is work that must be done by men and women together. The pink tax is the epitome of structured sexism at work. It's because of this that we are so proud to propose this House would ban the pink tax. First, a roadmap.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Debating for America's Youth. We're interviewing a special guest who is the member of the USA Development World Schools Debate Team, Hannah Snyder. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi Nathan, it's great to be on here.
Well, perfect. To begin, how did you get started in speech and debate, and what made you want to stick with doing speech and debate?
So I started speech and debate in 5th grade, which is really early compared to different programs around the country, but so I started in 5th grade, and what really got me into it was I tried out a few tournaments, wasn't so sure about whether it was something I would like, and I ended up absolutely falling in love with it. And from there, I just kind of like committed to one event and just kept like competing and learning and working with my coach. And from there, that's kind of how my love for speech and debate began.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. And why did you specifically choose Congressional debate as your main event?
Yeah, so there were a few different events on the middle school circuit, but I decided that I wanted to, like, I really loved the idea of kind of like simulating what people in like our Congress or parliaments in other countries do, and I just really loved being able to like analyze legislations and kind of like even be able to like amend them in round, and it was just a really like great experience. And so I kind of I tried that one out for the first time. I was just encouraged to do that, and I fell in love with it. So that's how I got into Congress.
Definitely. And what would you say would be the best event to prepare you for World Schools Debate?
That's definitely a hard one. I don't really think that there's any right or wrong event to prepare you for World Schools, because at the end of the day, debate skills transfer from event to event. But I do definitely think that Lincoln Douglas was a really good preparation for World Schools, specifically because there's parts of the Lincoln Douglas event that are like extemporaneous, or you're refuting your opponent's arguments, and that's something that's very similar to what happens in World Schools.
Definitely. And for people who don't know what World Schools is, briefly explain what World Schools is and how it operates.
Yeah, so World Schools is it's an international event, and basically it's you're on a team of 3 to 5 people, and there are typically there's three people will speak in the round, but you can have upwards of 5 people on your team. And basically what happens is you're given either a prepared motion, which means that you prepare for the topic in advance, or you're given an impromptu motion, which means that you're given an hour to prepare with your team on a topic that's given, and then you choose 3 people from your team that will go ahead and speak for your team, and you go in and you basically debate. And how the kind of program works for World Schools is that you're given a topic, and you'll either support it or negate it. But the really cool thing about World Schools is that you can create, it's very much like indicative of the name, you create your own world almost. So for instance, if the topic is like this house would support like authoritarian regimes in times of crisis, on like if you were to negate that, you can almost like create your own model and create like what your world would look like when you're not supporting the topic that's given. So I think there's definitely a lot of leeway in World Schools as to how you approach the topic, but that's how it works.
Interesting. And I have a friend who did World Schools Debate at NSDA Nationals. He was explaining that there's some prepared topics and some topics that you're not prepared for. How would you explain that part?
Yeah, so it really depends on the tournament, but the topics that you go in prepared for, obviously you're going to work on it weeks prior to the tournament, and for that in particular, you're able to use the internet and statistics that you may find or something on a prepared motion. The difference between a prepared motion and impromptu motion is that during an impromptu motion, you're given 2 things. You're given a dictionary and you're given an almanac, and from there you need to prepare the case without using the internet. So you really just have to pull from your knowledge for examples, and you kind of have to come up with a principled argument, so like a moral, or you have to come up with like more practical arguments, so some of the direct impacts that you'll see. But those are the really difference between prepared and impromptu, and I think in my personal opinion, I really love impromptu motions more, because I feel like sometimes if you have too much time to think about something, you can almost go too much into it where it'll be counterintuitive to your goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And also, in that aspect, with the more impromptu motions, I would see how more of a congressional debater would excel in that kind of environment, because a lot of congressional debate, as you know, is more extemporaneous speaking and less, like a lot of times you can go into a tournament with less preparation versus like more of a Lincoln Douglas where you have most of your stuff prepared out before.
Yeah, definitely. I really do think that congressional debate really does prepare you for world schools as well, because within congressional debate, there's a lot of the times where you're gonna get up there and kind of be extemporaneously speaking, and it's very similar to how it works in impromptu. The only difference is that with Lincoln Douglas, there's definitely a lot more refutation built into your speeches than there is in Congress, simply because of the fact that Congress speeches are relatively short. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that Congress does really prepare you for world schools as well.
Definitely. And so this can go for congressional debate or even for world schools. How do you prep for a debate? How do you, what's your research process, and how do you come up with the best argumentation?
Yeah, so the research process is like a step-by-step process. The first thing that I usually do is, obviously you have to understand what the topic is talking about. So whether it's a motion in world schools or whether it's a legislation in Congress, you have to understand what they're trying to propose to you, what they're asking you to either support or not support. And from there, what I typically do is I'll just look for very surface level, pro and cons for any of the topics. And from there, I'll go ahead and take what I see and I'll do some more research on the pros or cons that I found. And from there, I'll form my arguments. So I definitely don't just go on procon.org or any of those kind of sites and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna use that argument and go ahead and turn that into a paragraph for my speech. I rather take that concept and I do some more research in it and see if maybe I can use that concept to form an argument for the topic that we're working on. Some of the sites that I'll use for researching, Google Scholar is really great to find academic journals and really reliable sources and publications and evidence to be able to use. But if I weren't going to be using Google Scholar, I'd just be looking for sites that are organizations or they're academic institutions or they're institutes like the Brookings Institute. So that's typically how my research in preparation goes.
Definitely. And just to bounce off that, when I'm looking for more of a statistics, the ones I look for are the Pew and Gallup, because they have good statistics. And I'm looking for more more of an opinion or more of a a stance on a topic. The Brookings Institute is really good. The New York Times, Washington Post. So it all depends on what you're really looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
So what advice would you give to someone just getting started in world schools debate? What is something that you wish you knew going in, and how do you think you got better at world schools?
Yeah. So this really is going to sound cheesy, but it's so true. And that's and this is something that, when I was going into it, I was terrified to step out of my comfort zone. But I think the most important thing in world schools is to step outside of your comfort zone. So especially with extemporaneously speaking, it can be a nerve-wracking and terrifying experience to do for the first time. But I think that especially if you're really into debate and you've already got those skills from something else, or even if you don't, it's really just jumping into it and being confident that what you have in the idea or stance or argument that you are running is actually, it's going to work out for you. So I really think the biggest piece of advice that I can give to people starting with world schools is it's definitely different than any other debate event that you've done, if you've done debate before. But it's important to remember that you've also got 3 to 4 more people on your team that can help you out. And so I think at the end of the day, it's really just don't be afraid to go outside of your comfort zone and just speak, because at the end of the day, you're in this activity because you love speaking and you love you love arguing with people, and that will definitely transfer into how well you do with World Schools.
Definitely. And specifically when you're talking about like speaking in front of people, in congressional debate, I would assume World Schools as well.
Yeah.
When you're speaking in front of a large group of people, or even your people you're debating against, how do you get over speaking, those nerves that you get when you stand up and speak in front of people?
Yeah, so there's absolutely no doubt the nerves, you're gonna have nerves. It's just a matter of how you deal with them. And so I think there's a few things that I will typically do when it comes to dealing with nerves. The first thing is this is really simple, but you basically just try and imagine as if you're speaking in front of a mirror to yourself and no one is there. And so I think like that's a really good exercise to do as you're speaking in front of a large audience, just to pretend that there's no one there and that you're just speaking to yourself in front of a mirror. The second thing that I think is useful, especially when speaking in front of audiences, is having something that you can do to calm those nerves, because sometimes the nerves can truly get out of control, and I've seen that with some people before. I think some techniques that you can use, and they're very like small techniques, is something as simple as like, it sounds kind of like crazy, but just like wiggling your toes, or something like, grabbing the piece of paper like a little bit harder than you normally do. There's little things that you can use, and you're gonna have to try it out for yourself, but different techniques that you can use to kind of like calm the nerves. But it's also important to remember, even without doing any of these techniques, that like you participate in this event because you love what you do, but also you need to remember that you're talented at what you do, and to not let an audience like throw that off for you.
Definitely. I would agree with that. One technique I like to do is I like to do deep breathing before I get up and speak in front of people, to kind of calm myself down, so when I'm up there, I'm more calm and I don't sound like rushed or nervous or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that this is something that, that a lot of people do, unfortunately, when they get nervous, is they speak really, really fast, almost as if they're trying to rush through it. And that's actually counterintuitive, especially to addressing the nerves, because it makes the nerves worse. So definitely focusing on the deep breathing, like you said, but also even slowing down how fast you're speaking really does help the nerves.
Definitely. I like to have a little, this is just my personal preference, but I like to have a lot of canned intros. So then when I'm giving them, I know the intro, and so I can slow down on the intro. And so then I start off my speech in a slow pace. So then it's not starting off super rushed and calming down later. It's starting off at something I'm familiar with, and then going into data I might have just researched the night before.
Exactly. Yep, definitely.
So, in conclusion, I know you're still part of the speech and debate community, but what would you like to say to it? Is there something that you think that needs to be addressed in the speech and debate community, or something you would just like to say to whoever watches this video?
Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, to whoever's watching, keep up with speech and debate. It is one of the most rewarding experiences that anybody could ever participate in. There is so much that comes out of it, not only about learning about yourself and what you love, but also just being a part of such an enormous and kind community. So my biggest piece of advice or even something to say to people who are watching this is keep it up, keep participating. But the second thing is that, people who are experienced in speech and debate, or even if you just started, sharing this activity with other people and trying to be yet another person that's really inclusive of everybody that may want to participate in this activity. Because at the end of the day, the larger we make the speech and debate community, even internationally, the more people that we reach out to and the more people that we compete against, the more of a vast international empowering community that we can create. So I think that's those are kind of my few ending pieces of advice to people who are watching, and something that we can kind of all focus on within the speech and debate community is definitely growing it and being really inclusive of every group.
Completely agree. I think that, well, especially like looking back over the last 4 years in speech and debate, I don't regret any of it. I have absolutely loved it. And also something I would say is a lot of times you can get caught up in trying to win, and I especially have. But a lot of times if you step back and just enjoy the tournament, enjoy being around people, I think you'll look back on those years very fondly.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely not an experience like it.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for everyone who's watching this video, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.